Okay, in this tutorial we're going to create a new document, but rather than using centimetres we're going to use pixel measurement instead. Now the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to find an image that is a certain pixel size, and we're going to make our canvas that size so the image will fit perfectly. So in order to do that, let's go to a search engine, say Google, and I've just found a picture of a Lamborghini, a car I dream of having one day, on a desert road. Now if you look, I can see the actual pixel size as I hover over that image. It's 1920 by 1080. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy those and put those in as my measurements. So my width will be 1980 or 1920 in this case, and my height will be 1080. Make sure my canvas color is transparent, and now when I import that picture, which I can do by right clicking and select import, when I place it on the canvas, when I move it into position, you can see that generally it roundabout fits the canvas size, which is just quite handy. You don't have to stretch it. So now I've done that, I want to think about what else I can do. If I'm just zooming in here to 100%, you can see how big 1980 by 1080 actually is in terms of pixel size. So what I want to do is I want to draw around this car this time, but rather than use the pen tool to trace it, I'm actually going to make a copy of part of the picture. I'm actually going to almost cut a part out of it. And I can do that by using something called the Polygon Lasso tool, which I've just selected. It works in a very similar way to the pen tool. I just need to set a point to start with, which I've done by clicking. Then I drag this line to another place where I want to set the next point. Now obviously again the same rules apply as do with using the pen tool, in that the more complex the image, the more points you might want to make before you join up the shape. Obviously if there's curves you might need to zoom right in and do lots and lots of little steps in order to make it look as curved as possible when you actually cut the object out. So I'm just being really crude here and quickly just tracing around it. I'm not going to make too much effort. Obviously bear in mind as you become more experienced with this tool, you could do things like actually cut out the different objects. So you could cut out wheels as well as the car, and they may exist on different layers, so you could do different effects with different parts of the vehicle. But in this instance we're just going to cut out the car in one object, because what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of that so that we can make some changes to the background that don't make any changes to the car itself. So just crudely going around it, making sure you've got most of the features covered. And obviously bear in mind that when you make copies of things, you can do lots of different things to those copies. You can change colours, you can add filters and effects, you can actually cut a part of it out, so you might have a person amongst a crowd and you might only want that one person, so you can cut them out and place them into whatever background you want really. And that's pretty much what we're going to do with this. We're going to separate this object from the background so that we can make changes to the background without affecting the actual car itself. So as we go around, we just make sure we get most of the window, try and avoid that background, and then as we reach the last area, we just click, and as we do that you can now see we have this sort of jagged zigzaggy line. And what we can do, we can copy by using Control and C, like you copy text in Word, and then we can just do Control V, and now you see in your layer area you have a bitmap layer, a new layer, and just by turning on and off the different layers you can see that by turning off the background layer you can see that I now have a car. Now if I turn the car layer off, you can see it makes no difference because it's actually sat exactly on top of it. But in order to actually see that we have two copies, make sure you've got the selection tool selected, and then move that layer around, and you can see that actually we've got two cars. Now I'm going to undo that because I want it to sit in exactly the same position, so that when I make changes to the background you can't notice any sort of movement in the car. So what I'm doing now is adding a filter to the background. Make sure I've got my background layer selected. The layer that I select will be the layer that I make the effects onto. So right now I'm looking for a filter called Alpha, and what that will do is it will turn an area from colour to black and white. So by selecting that and selecting it on my background, you can see that I've made my background black and white now. So the car itself, the copy of the car, remains colour, but the background on the car behind it are black and white. So you can see that I've made a very, very simple change that's made the picture much more dramatic. You can add as many filters as you want. So what I'm actually going to do now is make the car look like it's actually moving. So I'm selecting a filter called motion blur, and I'm just setting an angle and a distance that the blur applies to. So if I want to make it look like it's speeding past to the left, I'm going to just play around with the distance and angle to make sure I've got that right. So at the moment I maybe need to adjust the angle from 0 degrees to 180 degrees, which once I've done, make the blur sort of appear in the right direction. So rather than reversing at speed, I'm actually speeding away. So when I set that to 180 and let it catch up and click OK, and you can see that now I have an image that features a colour car on a black and white background that has had some motion blur, which is a very simple effect to do. You can do very complex things to very, very basic pictures that make them look far more dramatic, and this is something that you could think about doing within your logo.